Good evening, campers, dreamers, and babysitters. Lost in a hostile forest, the Marquis, a noble emissary of the King of France, finds refuge in the home of a very strange family. Yes, folks, this is our raw reaction review for the Vourdalak. Well, Luke, we are back. It's been a very interesting week for, I gotta say, 18th century vampire stuff. I just talked about the Nosferatu trailer. Yes, I went and saw the Bike Riders, or at least the trailer before the Bike Riders, and then I left. But yeah, I'm a nerd. Get over it. And yeah, then we knew we had this. We've had this for a little bit. We got this real early, and we were kind of circling. Let's see, maybe we get this out super early. Maybe we wait till we get a little closer, and I think it just kind of fell into our lap. So we're going to do this about a week before the film drops, and we have seen another 18th century vampire flick called The Vourdalak, which this is a French film, so French Gothic horror film, I should say. And this came on my radar probably about the same time everybody else, like about a month ago. And I gotta say, I barely watched any of the trailer. I saw like a couple snippets. I saw that poster, and I said, you know what? I'm sold. And then it turned out that someone that we buddy around with on Twitter a little bit, Ted, he was doing some of the PR for this. So he emailed us and said, hey, I can get you guys a screener. So we made it happen, and now we're here. So Luke, let's start diving in. How did you feel about the Vourdalak?
You know, going into this one, I did not see a trailer. I just knew we had the screener. So I hopped in this one as cold as a corpse, I guess you'd say. So going into it, didn't really know what to expect. No, it was a smaller film. And then, came to realize this was shot, in 16 millimeter, I believe.
I believe so, yes. It's definitely got something to it.
It's got a particular aesthetic to it, and this being 18th century. I was curious to see how they were going to tackle it, being a smaller film. And, sometimes that stuff comes off authentic. Sometimes it just comes off like, they didn't have the budget, the means to really justify the idea. And I will say, going into this one, I don't know. I was a little underwhelmed. The story it's a very slow burn, as we talked about before we started recording this. It's something where you're waiting around a lot for really the story to get going. And for this being an hour 30, you certainly do feel that at the very beginning. And really, a lot of the interesting parts don't happen till probably the last half hour, I would say. So, for this one, I think they had some good elements to it. It just left me wanting more, I guess, because they didn't cover enough ground throughout the duration of the film.
Yeah, I would agree for the most part with that. I wholeheartedly agree that this is slow. This is very slow to start, which again isn't always bad, but like for me, I felt like we didn't get nearly enough. We're really dropped into this story in a very odd spot, I found. Like looking into this, looking like back on it, the film kind of just goes, and there's no inciting incident. We really just start following a character, and you just kind of let things roll. And then finally we get to probably about the 40-minute mark, and something happens. There's like a dinner. You see it in the trailer a little bit, and that's when things start to pick up and they start to get a little bit more interesting. But yeah, those first I'd say about 35 minutes, it's establishing character, but even then, a lot of these characters are so devoid of any kind of personality, really, other than our main character. And it's so hard to connect with anybody. And I can see that being a huge turnoff for a lot of casual viewers for this one.
Yeah, the dinner scene that you're speaking of actually happens about 30 minutes in. And that's kind of like, there's an interesting element that plays. If you've seen the trailer, there's a high point into this in terms of a practical effect that's rather interesting. And, that's when it takes place during that dinner scene. And for me, I started really focusing in on it. I was like, oh, they're going to start throwing a lot of interesting things our way. And finally, the payoff of sitting through that first 30 minutes of, just kind of establishing some things. And, even after that element's dropped in for me, it's more so getting to know the family. isn't this kind of, the wheels start turning. We're on a great track to, really catch your attention. I felt myself waiting around a little more. And there are some elements, familial elements that we get into with, the father character and some of the other characters in the family. And I think those are interesting elements, but I don't know. I felt like they did not give me enough. Where those outside scenes, especially the night scenes, for me really did work. I think they bring that eeriness to it. For me, there just was not enough of that. And I think, when you see something that you really like and there's a lot of potential there, I say, double down on that. And, I didn't feel that they necessarily did that. It kind of just felt like we present an interesting element and then we're kind of waiting around again. Then we get another interesting element, but it's never realized to its full potential. And I'll say, I think the back half of this, that last 30 minutes, we start getting some more intriguing elements. There's a scene in here that both Dylan and I talked about prior to this, and we can't really dive into it because it'd be a spoiler, but it is something that's terrifying, but also comedic, oddly enough. And, once that happens, that's where it's like, the film's like, okay, we're getting one element after another element, but then, we're getting really close to wrap up time. So, I felt like as I was really settling into this film, the credits were rolling.
Yeah. And, I agree that scene that we're talking about, it's very jarring. It's very exciting to kind of see that happen, because it is very weird. It gets into that kind of very strange, experimental kind of storytelling. And I would say there's a lot of that throughout this film. I don't want to discount it entirely and say that it is just very painfully slow at times, but there's a good deal of experimentation, especially in the presentation. I think that the fact they kind of shot this like a film from the 60s and 70s is a really big highlight. I love a lot of the color in this movie. I think I made the joke beforehand here where I called this Barry Lyndon with vampires. And it very much feels like that. I mean, I think that it's got a lot of those elements. And I mean, you're dealing with 18th century France, so obviously there's going to be those comparisons. But I think there is some really neat ideas in here. And again, the way that they're choosing to shoot this and present it, it is very experimental and it is very entertaining from that standpoint. But again, if you're looking at this purely from a story-based perspective, there isn't a whole lot here for, again, probably the first hour of this movie. And it is pretty bare bones for a while. But then, like Luke said, once you get into that last half hour, and we start kind of diving into a little bit more of the lore and kind of what they're doing with whatever the Vourdalak is, because they only say vampire once, and it's kind of like and I can spoil this, it's kind of like an offhanded comment. It's not really like they don't really take it serious. So the Vourdalak is a very different kind of vampire. And I thought that was really cool. And again, when we talk about experimentation, there's an effect in here. It's a huge centerpiece to this movie. I found myself completely jarred by it at first, and then I found myself falling in love with it. But again, that is a make it or break it element 100%, because there are going to be people who watch this and see that and how they're presenting it, and they're going to say, wow, that looks terrible. But I adored it because, again, it harkens back to kind of older cinema and how they would present certain effects. And I adored that part of it.
Yeah, and for me, that was the element that I focused in on so heavily. This, for me, it's kind of got those, what you, I guess, A24 elements, but for me, it kind of was like an A24 light for me, where this really never kicked into gear. And then when they dropped this practical effect in here, I thought that was rather interesting. It's almost got like a creep show element to it. It just seems like, it's out of place, but it absolutely worked for me because it's something, as soon as you see it, I think you have to make that decision whether you're in and you're just going to have a lot of fun with it, or you're out and it just turns you off completely. And I think that's where, for me, I was totally in to have some fun, but that fun never came until like the last half hour or, last 20 minutes of the film. So, for me, they kind of set the table for something exciting, and then it just never really pans out until that last little bit of it. But I gotta say, to use a practical effect like that with the way that they do in this, I think, hats off, because that is a big risk, especially with the tone that they were going for originally when they set the table here, and then they dropped that in here. But, I think they made it work to a certain extent. Just the narrative, it just wasn't there, I don't think. I think the filmmaking aspect was, the practical effect was, but just the narrative in general, especially when you deal with the Vourdalak element, which there is a vampiric lore to that. And if you don't know too much about it, I think it's rather interesting to look into, because it offers different elements than just a basic vampire. So I think you could have played with those elements a little more, maybe expanded upon it. And when you're dealing with the familiar elements, really kind of go down that route with it when you have so many other characters you can play with. But I don't think they really necessarily do that, at least to its full potential. So for me, this one did leave me underwhelmed. I know we did talk about it prior to recording. I think, I am gonna go worth a watch on this one, just because of the practical effects is rather interesting. I think the filmmaking aspect is there. Just the narrative is a little light for me.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to put that, is the narrative is light. It is something that is going for more, I guess, not to compare it too much to like Michael Bay or anything, but it's going for more flash than it is flavor. And I think that this is one of those things where it's like, there is going to be people who I think really resonate with this and enjoy it for what it is. I think that they're just, if they would have spent a little bit more time, maybe building up our characters a bit more and not making them so cut and dry, I think that there would have been a bit more of a connection there. I can say that Casey Motet Klein, who plays our main character, I thought he was great. I thought that he had a lot of scenes where it's like he's kind of playing almost this oh my god, I'd almost say he's like a character out of like the Holy Grail, Monty Python at times. And I know that sounds like a dig, but it's not. He's just such a fish out of water in some of these elements, and it really adds for some really darkly comedic moments. But then this film will also just take on really serious and kind of heart-wrenching moments at times, where, like, we talked about it a little bit, there's a sequence just with one little phrase that gets uttered, and it's just like, oof, that's so dark, that's so crazy. And I think it's a bit of a mixed bag, so I'm gonna go worth a watch on this. Again, from a filmmaking perspective, I completely am in love with it. I love the techniques they used. I love that they shot for the fences with it, and I love the practical effect. It is seriously the centerpiece of this film. And you're right, Creepshow, very good comparison to kind of how that was presented. And yeah, I can see myself potentially, maybe at least checking out a portion of this film again. I don't know if I'd sit down for a full rewatch, but I'm not upset that I saw it. It didn't feel like a total waste of time. It felt like I got enough out of it, just not enough that I wanted.
Yeah, I think, in terms of rewatchability, and I think that's a big thing for me, is how many times will I revisit this film? And I don't see myself going back. Certainly not the full film. I think maybe scenes of it I could, pick out and enjoy, but I don't think I'd ever sit down and watch this one for the whole hour 30, just because it does not offer enough for me. But again, there's an interesting element that I think a lot of people should check out. So, if this does intrigue you, if the, Gothic 18th century French, I don't know, films, maybe that's too specific, I don't know. But if that interests you, maybe check this one out. But yeah, worth a watch. I think there's some interesting things, but just not enough there.
Yeah, and if you guys are interested in this, this one's going to be opening up exclusively in cinemas this upcoming Friday on June 28th. So I definitely recommend going out and trying to see this. If this sounds like something up your alley, watch that trailer. It gives you just enough of a taste of what's going on. But again, just be a little bit warned. Understand that, it does take a while to get going. But I think for people who are really into period piece slow burns, and I think overall people who really love Gothic horror are going to love a lot of the elements that are in here. So I think it's totally worth a watch on that aspect. If you are more of a traditionalist when it comes to your vampires and you want something that's a bit more edgy and a bit more fast paced, this is not your film. So that's really, I think, where we're going to sit with this one. But yeah, I had a good time with the Vourdalak overall. Other than that, we got a lot of great stuff up on the channel. Yes, we do have a list going over some must-watch summer films, and that's getting a lot of good response. We really appreciate you guys checking that out. We're going to be doing some more lists and some more things involving summer horror over the next couple of months. And yeah, we got a lot of reviews coming up, a lot of fun stuff. Got a new Shudder property that we're going to be checking out and getting out here in a day or so. So yeah, if you guys are interested in any of that, keep it right here on Splattercast. If you like what we're doing here, hit this video with a like and also give us a little subscribe. We'd appreciate it. So, all right, I guess that's going to wrap us up. So until next time, I'm Dylan Newell.
And I'm Luke Janesco.
And remember, stay scared.
Do the horror shit, gonna do it live. Cause Splattercast kick it every day they live. Splattercast, slash ass. 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 Splattercast, slash ass.